Hi everyone! In this video, my colleagues and I are going to analyze how the leverage choices of Luxottica have impacted the growth on its stock market value. Luxottica is an Italian firm leader in its sector, the production and the sales of glasses. It is also the owner of some worldwide known brands like Ray-Ban and Oakley, and produces under license for many designers, including Bulgari, Dolce & Gabbana, Prada and Chanel. From 2010 to 2015, there has been a constant growth in revenues and net income that reached the level of 855 million in 2015. But have the firm's choices in terms of debt over equity played a role in its growth? In order to implement our analysis, we have followed these steps. We first found out the overall market value of the firm looking at the market capitalization. Second, we subdivided this value into the steady state and the value of growth. Third, we computed the debt on equity ratio using the accounting values, and we applied it both to the overall value of the firm and to the steady state only, in order to discover the debt-backed growth, which is the portion of the value of growth financed through debt. Finally, we analyzed the trend of the main profitability ratios like ROE and ROI, in order to understand the contribution of leverage in the stock market value of Luxottica. To obtain more significant evaluation, we have considered a time horizon of 5 years, from 2011 to 2015. And for each year, we have computed the specific parameters required to run our analysis. As previously said, the first step is to find the overall market value of the firm. To do so, we have taken the market capitalization given by this formula. The result was also confirmed by our computation, where we used the Gordon and Shapiro evaluation model, entering the relative growth estimated by analysts. As you can see from this graph, Luxottica capitalization has been growing significantly in the past years, due to the good financial performances and the managerial capabilities of the board of directors to create value, as you will see later. The second step is to divide the overall value of the firm into its two components, the steady state layer and the value of growth. To estimate the steady state, we have decided to run the analysis in the following way. We decided to consider ourselves as potential investors that were trying to evaluate the firms looking at the market expectations in each of the years of our analysis. Since we are operating in a complete and efficient market and we are actually running an historical analysis, we have decided to assume that such expectations regarding Luxottica's performance eventually became true. And that's why we have used the data provided by annual financial reports, where each analyzed year is considered the first and the following ones the expected. For example, when analyzing the value of Luxottica in 2011, the actual data regarding 2012 were considered as expected, meaning that the market's expectations in 2011 were fully correct.
There are two ways to compute the steady state. The first one is to take the market values of debt and equity, discounting the cash flows at their relative cost of capital. The second one is to discount the free cash flow of operating at the cost of operating capital. In this second way, we found the unlevered value, and then we have to add the value of the tax shield. Accordingly, we have firstly computed the free cash flow to debt and the free cash flow to equity, starting by Luxottica's financial reports. The free cash flow to debt is the portion of cash flows which is designated to pay back debts contracted with third parties, whereas the free cash flow to equity is the residual portion of cash flows available for equity holders once paid debts. In addition, we have also computed the enterprise value, taking the free cash flow from operating, which is the cash flow generated by the operating activities, using this formula. As previously said, we have also had to estimate the cost of equity and the cost of operating in order to transform those book values into market values. They have been computed using these formulas, where we have used as risk-free the yield to maturity of a 10 years Italian BTP. The market risk premium has been provided by the Mojan's website, but the main difference is the beta considered. As a matter of fact, in the computation of the cost of equity, we have used the beta levered, while in the computation of the cost of operating, we have considered the beta unlevered. The cost of debt measures the overall rate that a company sustains to be financed through debt, and it also reflects its riskiness. Thus, in order to estimate it, we have added to the risk-free rate the default spread of Luxottica, which is the measure of the likelihood that a firm will not honor its debt obligations. Finally, since the enterprise value and the market value of debt and equity through our computations were almost the same, we have decided to use as steady state the market value of debt and equity. Then, to find out the value of growth, we backed out from the market capitalization the steady state. As you can see from the graph, an important evidence is that the contribution of the value of growth to the overall value of Luxottica has increased over time, reaching the 44% of the total amount in 2015. Moreover, we have computed the leverage ratio using the accounting values of debt and equity.
As you can see, from 2011 to 2015, Luxottica has decreased its debt on equity ratio. In fact, on one hand, the level of debt has remained almost constant over time, while, on the other hand, equity has increased significantly. Particularly, in order to really capture how much the ratio has changed, you should look at the difference between the first and the last years. In 2011, the book value of equity was lower than the book value of debt. In fact, the debt and equity ratio was 1.38. However, in 2015, this proportion was reversed, since the debt on equity ratio was reduced to 0.78. The next step of our analysis is to understand if this variation on the debt on equity ratio is linked with the firm's growth and with how Luxottica is perceived by the market. In order to do so, firstly, we apply the debt on equity ratio to the overall value of the firm, and secondly, to the value of the steady state only. We did this in order to understand if debt is financing growth or not. As a matter of fact, our starting point is that, at least from a theoretical point of view, debt should not finance growth. The value of growth is in fact extremely volatile, implying a superior risk without an underlying tangible asset that could justify an investment from the banking system. In fact, Luxottica growth comes from the firm's superior managerial capability to create value. We can prove this by comparing the return on investment with the cost of capital. For example, in 2011, Luxottica is paying 8.15 and it's reinvesting at 9.34, producing therefore a value-creating growth. This will be later analyzed in detail inside the profitability analysis. Coming back to the debt on equity ratio, looking at this graph, in almost all years, the debt-backed growth was negative, even if the leverage ratio was applied to the overall value. Clearly, this level becomes even more negative if we apply the debt on equity ratio on the steady state only, meaning that the value of growth is always financed just by equity. This let us state that Luxottica is financing its increasing value of growth through equity.
So, in the last step, we did a profitability analysis using the return on equity index to understand better the link with the growth of stock market value during the years. Return on equity is the amount of net income returned as a percentage of shareholders' equity and measures a corporation profitability by revealing how much profit a company generates with the money shareholders have invested. This index is strictly connected to the Luxottica stock price because it is one of the most important parameters that indicates the firm's performance. As you can see from this graph, the ROE trend is increasing over the years. Return on investment is a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of the operative activity of a firm relating to its total asset invested in the company. Return on debt shows how much the usage of borrowed funds contributes to profitability, and particularly, if you consider this formula, there is a positive relation between leverage ratio and return on equity. If the return on investment is higher than the return of debt, the leverage effect takes place and enhances the value of the return on equity. From data, we stated out that leverage is decreasing through time and the return on investment has a positive trend, while return on debt decreases. Generally speaking, leverage has a positive impact on ROE if the return on investment is higher than the return on debt, as this is the case. The leverage effect takes place and increases the value of the firm. However, even if the D on E is decreasing, the return on equity, as previously shown, generally increases. This happens since the joint effect of the decreasing of the return on investment and the decreasing of the return on debt is greater than the loss of value related to the decreasing of the leverage ratio. The rising of the return on investment is related to the increasing of the investment profitability due to the superior managerial capabilities of Luxottica Board of Directors. The decreasing of ROD can be motivated looking either at the bargaining power of Luxottica towards the banking system and either to the historical period in which the cost of debt is systematically decreased. In conclusion, running our analysis, we tried to state out how the leverage choices of Luxottica have impacted the growth of the stock market value. To do this, we have followed these steps. We first found out the overall value of the firm, looking at the market capitalization. Second, we subdivided the value of steady state and the value of growth. Third, we computed the D/E ratio using the accounting values, and we applied it on the overall value and steady state in order to discover the debt-back growth. Finally, we analyzed the trend of the main profitability ratios like return on equity and return on investment in order to understand the contribution of leverage in the stock market value of Luxottica. In conclusion, thanks to our analysis, we stated out that Luxottica is financing its value of growth through equity, and even if the D/E ratio is decreasing, reducing the positive effect of the tax shield and of leverage, the company has been able to perform well, generating value, due to the fact that the return on investment has increased, meaning that the board of directors of Luxottica has been able, through their superior managerial capabilities, to raise the profitability of their investment.